So today is the 27th of June. We are very glad to be back, my bride and I, having survived the coronavirus. Today we're going to be in session 4, page 37, Book of Job, and the title of today's lesson is Wisdom Gained. And so, let's see, you weren't here last week, Jasmine, right? So the last 2 weeks, let me recap. Because the last time we were here was the first session, which was Job 1. And remember in Job 1, God was kind of having a meeting of some kind up there where God lives. And Satan came wandering in to the meeting, and God asked him, "Where you been? What you been doing?" Satan said, "I've been wandering the earth," because that's what Satan does. Hey, Tyler, good morning. Satan said, "I've been wandering the earth." And God said, "Have you considered my servant Job? Have you looked at Job?" And remember, Satan said, because Job was a good man. He was a very godly man. And Satan said, "Well, the only reason Job is a godly man and obedient is because you've blessed him so much. That's the only reason. It's like you bribe him and buy his loyalty." And God said, "I'll tell you what, I'm going to let you uh, do what you want to him. You can do anything you want short of taking his life," right? And so Satan did. He took away his flocks, his camels, servants, and then he took away his 7 kids, killed them. And all Job was left. And then Job was having disease problems. He was having, I don't remember, like boils or some kind of health ailment. So he took away everything except he kept his wife. Job still had his wife, but even she, at one point during all this, she said, "Why don't you just curse God and kill yourself?" Because she saw how Job was suffering. And luckily, of course, Job didn't do that. So that's how the book of Job started. And at the end of, let me just go back to it. The really, what really strikes me is at the end of this, chapter 1, there in verse 20 and 21, remember how Job responded. This was when all this happened, just messenger after messenger came, one after the other, to tell him, "We've lost this, we've lost this, we've lost this." And then his children were killed. And you see in verse 20, Job arose and rent his mantle, tore his cloak, shaved his head, and fell down upon the ground and worshiped. That was Job's initial response to all this bad that Satan did to him. And if you remember in verse 21, there's what he said: "Naked came I out of my mother's womb, naked shall I return thither." So I had nothing when I came into this world. And when I leave, regardless of what I've amassed, wealth or whatever, fame or no matter how many children I have or whatever it is, and this applies to every single person. When you die on this earth, no matter what you have or don't have, you can take nothing with you, right? So you come into this world with nothing, you leave with nothing. The significant thing for us as a Christian is what we do have that we leave with is we have the promise and the hope that once we die, we spend eternity with God. So that's better than anything that we can have in this world. But that was God's response. "Naked came out of my mother's womb, naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." If we could have that attitude of, it's good to have things, to be successful, whether it be in school, sports, clubs, to have a little bit of spending money, to have a job that you enjoy, that you can make a bit of money so you can, if you want to. I remember one of the first things I bought with my, money from mowing yards or whatever. I bought a bicycle when I was young. And then when I was in high school, I bought myself a pair of Nikes, because they were the big up and coming thing there. And it was nice to be able to buy things for myself because my parents provided for us. But there were just some things that no matter how much I begged, you're not getting those shoes. We'll go to Walmart. Or there wasn't a Walmart then, Kmart or whoever, and just get a pair of tennis shoes. And go, Nike. So there's no motivation, right? But anyway, no matter what it is that you have that you work for, those are all good things. But remember, as a Christian, everything we have, God gave us. Even if you're not a Christian, God created everything, right? So whether you acknowledge it or not, and at God's prerogative, for whatever reason, if He wanted to, He could allow it to be taken away. And that's what happened to Job. And Job responded perfectly. Came in this world with nothing. I'll have nothing when I leave. The Lord gave me everything I had. Now the Lord's taken it away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. So if we can have that attitude, no matter what happens to us in life, whew, that's fantastic. Mean it. Now, so over the next 2 weeks of lessons, and this is the book of Job is it's a great lesson. But so we started there in chapter 1. Now we're up to chapter 28. In those intervening 26 chapters from Job 2 through 27, what is happening is, if you remember from the lessons, Job's got 3 friends that come to visit him, and these are religious men, and they know Job was a devout man. And what do they do? But when they see his state, when they see that everything's been taken away, naturally, what they think is that God is punishing him for something, because they're thinking, why would God have done this to you, except that you've done something, and He's judging you or punishing you, right? Now, one of the things it talks about in the lesson today, the beauty that we have today is that we can read this story in the Bible and we know what happened. What did Job do wrong that caused him to lose everything? He did absolutely nothing wrong, right? For whatever reason, God allowed Satan to do bad to him, and so that is the lesson for us in that is that there are a lot of people that, particularly non-Christians, but there are even some Christians that if they see a bad thing happen to someone, particularly if it's a good person or a Christian, they would say, how can God let this happen? For example, how many of you know about the building that collapsed in Miami this week? I mean, it was a 12-story building. I don't know how many apartments were in it or exactly what it was. I think it was an apartment building. But the video was quite amazing. It's, there's just surveillance, there's security cameras everywhere. One of them just happens to be pointed that way. And what you see in the video is the building is kind of, it's one building, but it's got kind of 3 sections. And the center section just suddenly collapses. You remember seeing the World Trade Centers, or if you've seen the films of that, after they were up there burning for a while, and suddenly they just, or if you've ever seen videos of a demolition of a building where, okay, we're going to replace it with something so they get everybody out of it, clean it all out, and they set explosive charges at places in the bottom, and there's like a little, which is a pretty big explosive, but it doesn't look big because of the size of the building. And suddenly the building, it doesn't topple over. They put these charges because they want to contain the mess. They put these charges so the building just starts collapsing at the bottom, and the weight of the building it's like a pancake. It just collapses, right? Well, that's what happened to this building for no apparent reason. And there were people living in this building, right? And the last I saw, first there was reported 1 person dead and 150 or so missing. Last I saw 4 dead, and they're still looking. But the problem is, it's not like this 12-story building is kind of fell down and there's rooms in there. It fell into a pile of rubble. So who knows how likely is it? I mean, there's a chance they may find 1 or 2 people alive, because they found people alive after the trade center. But that was 3,000 people or so that were in those, right? Anyway, why did that happen? People would look at that. Some people would say, if your God is so good, because I'm sure there were Christians that lived in that building or visiting there or whatever the purpose of the building was, why did your God let them die? Why did your God make that building fall on them? Why does God allow a car accident and a child or a family dies? So people tend to want to come up with the reason for why things happen. And so what I was saying there was, we've got the benefit of being able to read the story, and we know from chapter 1, Job did nothing wrong. God, for whatever reason, allowed Satan to take everything away from him. And was God's purpose to test him? I don't know if that was exactly why God allowed it, but it was a test for Job, right? So his friends come to see him, and they see he's lost everything. He's got sores on him. His health is deteriorated. He's miserable in every way. And what do? Do they come to comfort him? They come to say, okay, and I don't know if they're all there together, if they kind of come in one at a time to see him. But the gist of it is, over and over, 2 or 3 times, they come in and they say, okay, Job, what did you do? You had to have done something. You have sinned. Because God is not just going to punish people for no reason, and you're being punished. So what did you do? You must have done something. And Job, over and over, maintains that he's done nothing. But even Job gets so discouraged that in the chapters leading up to today's chapter 28, he does. He says, I'll paraphrase it, but he says, why was I even born? Because I'm suffering so much. I wish that I had not been born because I'm tired of this. And there are a lot of people that, when you're when your circumstance, whatever it is, if it feels overwhelming, and y'all are young, but we've talked about this before. I remember being in school, and a lot of times you bring it on yourself. If you got the big test tomorrow and you've kind of dilly-dallied around and, well, I'll get to it, I'll study for it, or suddenly it's tomorrow and you go, oh man, I'm in trouble. And that can be very, very stressful, right? Or that paper's due tomorrow, or you've got the big game tomorrow, or your debate club, or whatever it is. If you didn't prepare properly for it, it puts a lot of stress on it. And so you're thinking, I don't want to go into this. Well, Job was at the point where he wished he had not been born. Hopefully you never get to that circumstance. If you do, call me, okay? And we'll talk. But because there's always a way out of every single thing. Okay, so anyway, so they kind of, Job, what did you do? What did you do? Because God wouldn't just punish someone for not doing something. You had to have done something. We know that he didn't. Job didn't understand it, but he did know that he had done nothing wrong. All right, so for today's lesson, the title of it again is Wisdom Gained. It says God's wisdom is found in fearing and obeying him. God's wisdom is found in fearing and obeying him. So we're going to talk about wisdom. All right. And the subtitle here on Blue Letter Bible says the search for wisdom is harder. What did it start with? Did it say something about wisdom? Job tells of earth's treasures. That's how this chapter starts. And he just describes gold and silver and precious jewels and whatnot. But the verses for there, 12 through 22. The search for wisdom is hard. So it says in the introduction, people today are seeking words of wisdom and dependable counsel concerning how to navigate life's challenges. And we all seek help in one way or another. I had a couple of projects at home this week. My dad's got an old backhoe, and it's been having a couple of issues, electrical things. I've never done anything like that. Where did I go to find out how to work on it? Where do you go to find out how to do things now? The internet. There's 2 things that I used. One was you can find a video for almost anything. Now you got to find, if you're going to find a video of how to, whether it's cook or work on a vehicle or whatever it is, you need to kind of make sure that the one you're looking at is someone who's not a wacky person who's going to lead you astray. The example of that, you guys probably are too young to remember this, but it's been relatively recent. The old phones, and your phone may have it. How did we used to listen with headphones? You plugged it in, right? So there was a little hole, a jack. There's this computer. There came a time, Apple was the first ones, I think it was the iPhone 7, that they stopped putting that earphone jack in there. And a lot of people went, why in the world did you do that? Because everybody on the planet has a set of headphones that they can plug into their computer or this, or what used to be the old Walkman, or whatever people use for music, MP3 player. You had to plug your headphone in. Well, Apple suddenly took that away. What they did, of course, was they used the charging port, right? You plugged into that. And people said, why in the world did you do that? I don't know the exact reason. To me, I look at it and go, now you've got to buy their headphones. So now you got to spend more money with Apple to be able to listen through that. Well, there were people, cruel people, out there in the world who made videos that said, "You guys know that Apple it's in there. They just didn't open the hole up, so you have to do it yourself." And they made videos that showed, here's how you do it. If you take your phone and wherever they said you do it, if you measure from this corner over, or 3/8 of an inch, whatever, and you make a mark there, you take your drill. You got to get the right perfect size drill bit, and you got to be pretty precise. But you drill a hole right there, you'll uncover that port where you plug your headphone in. I don't know how many people did it, but a lot of people did it. Guess what they did when they stuck a drill in their phone? They killed it. Why would somebody do that? The word that comes to my mind is cruel, right? I mean, there's jokes, there's practical jokes, there's funny jokes, there's jokes that aren't so funny, and then there's being cruel. Well, anyway, so back to my story. You have to be careful when you look on the internet for things to do, but that's how a lot of people find things. So that was one, looking at videos. The other thing I looked for was you can find an owner's manual for just about anything out there on the internet. And so, I looked it up, found one, and it had diagrams and whatnot, and I was able to do this work. Okay. So my point on that is, it says people today are seeking words of wisdom and dependable counsel concerning how to navigate life's challenges. I had a problem I needed to solve, looked on the internet, found a way to do it, and apply myself, and now the thing works. But it says, we may search the internet looking for the right piece of advice or help we need. We may fill our bookshelves or e-readers with self-help books. Do y'all still read books? Like, in your hand books for fun? You still, right? You need to. You need to. Well, you need to read. I'll put it that way. I like to have the book in my hand because I can put a bookmark in it, carry it with me, whatever. The other thing is, I like to, like in this Bible, if I wanted to go to Matthew in this Bible, if I go about that far, there's Acts. So I went 4 chapters too far, right? So it's about right there. If I want to look on this thing right here for Matthew, and it's in a document, I can't just go, it's about a little over halfway past the middle. So unless I have, and most things have this advanced, you can search like I just did, put in Job 1 or Job 28, and it'll take you right there. So it's just the technology. Once you get used to it, you know how to do it. But I've got a shelf of books at home. Just the ones that maybe one day I'll read them again. But anyway, we may fill our bookshelves or e-readers with self-help books. A lot of people try to do that to better themselves. I want to get smarter. I want to learn how to do a thing. But it says, while this is where I highlighted here on the introduction, while it is true others may offer helpful advice in life, the Bible reveals that the source and goal of wisdom is God. True wisdom comes from Him and leads to Him. So this is the difference between wisdom and knowledge. We've talked about this before. You're going to school, and what you learn in school is knowledge. You go there, you're ignorant, and I mean that. Ignorant is an adjective, a descriptive term. Some people say it in a mean way, but the term ignorant means that there's something you don't know, and until you know it, you're ignorant about that. So you go to school, and you learn. When you go to the first grade or second grade or wherever it is, you learn what 1 + 1 equals. You don't. When you walk in the door of the day one, you don't know, unless your parents have taught you at home, which hopefully they sort of invest time in you. But that's what school is for, to teach you those things. It gives you knowledge. Knowledge and wisdom are two completely different things. And I like to think of it as wisdom is the proper application of the knowledge that you gain. All right. So this is what this is about today, is the search for wisdom. Where do we find wisdom? So I'm going to read verses 12 through 22. And this is again Job talking about wisdom. And it says, but where shall wisdom be found? And where is the place of understanding? Man knoweth not the price thereof, neither is it found in the land of the living. Again, he's talking about wisdom. The depth said, "It is not in me," and the sea saith, "It is not with me." It cannot be gotten for gold, neither shall silver be weighed for the price thereof. It cannot be valued with the gold of Ophir, with the precious onyx or the sapphire. The gold and the crystal cannot equal it, and the exchange of it shall not be for jewels of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or of pearls, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. The topaz of Ethiopia shall not equal it, neither shall it be valued with pure gold. Whence then cometh wisdom? And where is the place of understanding? Seeing it is hid from the eyes of all living, and kept close from the fowls of the air. Destruction and death say, we have heard the fame thereof with our ears. So he starts out this passage or this section with where is wisdom found? Where can we find wisdom? And where is the place of understanding? And then the next looks like about probably 8 verses says, man don't know the price. You cannot put a price on wisdom. You can't buy it. And he goes through several, and neither is it found in the land of the living. And now he goes through several places. The depth says it's not in me. The sea saith it's not in me. And then he goes through all these precious things that even though they were the most valuable things at the time, for them you cannot get wisdom. Gold, silver, the gold of Ophir, which is even better than regular gold, apparently, onyx, sapphire. The gold and the crystal can't equal it. Even if you've got all the gold in the world, that does not equal one little bit of wisdom, right? And the exchange of it shall not be for jewels or fine gold. You can't buy wisdom. You can buy education. No mention made of coral, pearls, rubies, topaz, etc., etc. You get the picture. He goes through all these valuable things that wisdom that can't buy wisdom. Okay, so on page 39 it says, verse 12 introduces perhaps the central passage of the book of Job. So what is Job all about? We know it. Job gets tested. He has everything taken away. His friends come and say, "What'd you do wrong?" And he's trying to tell them, "I did nothing wrong." They say, "Yes, you did. You're lying to us because you've done something." What is it about? Where do we find wisdom? Because they're lacking wisdom. His friends are, and they're smart men. Okay. It says, verse 12 introduces perhaps the central passage of the book of Job. The answers to all of life's questions and the meaning of life are wrapped up in wisdom. Boy, that sounds like something we'd want to have, wisdom. True wisdom is characterized by the fear of the Lord, and that's from Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That's what that proverb says. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So until that time, you can be the smartest guy on the planet. You can think you're very wise, but you're not. It recognizes wisdom. It recognizes a God as both the source and goal of wisdom. It recognizes God as the creator and that he created everything and everyone to bring glory to him. That's our purpose on this earth. We were created in God's image, right? Let us make man in our image. And it was to glorify God. Now, the fringe benefit is we get to live on a beautiful planet. We're very lucky we live in a beautiful place. We're all dressed nicely. We all, we have cars in our family. Hopefully, we all, get to eat 3 meals a day. We get a free education for y'all. It's free through the public schools. The next step, if you go to college, then you have to figure that out. But we're blessed. We are truly blessed, right? Of where we live, our families, the things that we have. But that doesn't give you wisdom. Okay. Recognizes that God is the creator. He has created everything and everyone to bring glory to him. That's our ultimate purpose. It is the realization that God is working all things according to his purpose, whether we realize it or not. Since God has a concern for all things, people should acknowledge him and submit to him in every aspect of their life. Boy, there's one that's kind of hard to do, especially you got a lot of competing interests. We were talking earlier with Mike going up into West. He's going to have a whole different set of challenges because that's one of the things you learn when I remember at rugby. When you were at that time, ninth grade was at rugby. It was rugby junior high. It was 7th, 8th, and ninth grade. And man, oh man, even though, when you were the ninth grader at rugby, You were a freshman in high school, even though the high school was down the road, right? So you were even separated a little bit there at rugby. You had seventh and eighth graders, and they were, you knew all of them, even though you were a ninth grader, but you were different because you were high school. You were a freshman. Now they call it middle school, right? So it's now really the step before high school. But even now, just like then, when you were in the top grade at rugby, you're kind of the king of the walk, right? I mean, you're the big man on campus. I mean, that's just by virtue of being an eighth grader. That's the top of the heap at rugby. And now you're going to go to West. You're a freshman, so you're a high schooler. But now you go back to from being the top of the group to there's 12th, 11th, 10th, and then there's the freshmen who are wide eyed and kind of clean each other, going, okay, this is all new. How do we do this? And you'll figure it out. But it's see, there we go. Because you're going to be very benevolent and give good advice and remember back when you were a freshman, right?
I was smart. I was able to.
Okay.
But those freshmen think that they can avoid everything.
And that's just part of that's just hopefully it's done with in fun and a good spirit. But anyway, so it says, since God has a concern for all things, people should acknowledge Him and submit to Him in every aspect of their lives. That's hard to do. And that's where I was going with that. Is you've got so many things that are competing for your thoughts, your will, whether it be friends. Lots of things compete for your heart. Okay, if we can put God first, then everything else will take care of itself, even though sometimes it seems like you're in trouble. Anyone can acquire wisdom, it says, with some effort and experience. However, in this verse, Job raised the question, where can wisdom be found? And I will say that there is wisdom out there in the world that's not, I mean, there are Christians. I mean, there are non-Christians that are wise. There are smart, wise people. And I would say we've already discussed as we read the verses, you can't buy wisdom. And by that, I mean, you literally can't purchase wisdom to have put in your brain. How do you generally get wisdom? Well, you certainly can get it from God. See, and that's what I was thinking was you learn things through school, your parents, your grandparents teach you things. Your siblings teach you things, but wisdom generally comes from experience. All right. So it says, the question here says, what are some sources a person may turn to when seeking wisdom? What makes the quest for wisdom daunting and frustrating for some? So what are sources you may turn to? Now, let's see, you're only child. No, you got Eli. So, right. You're the only child. You've got siblings, but they're younger than you, right? Now, I mean, you got Whitney and Ashley that are sort of, the blended family. So you're the middle guy. Well, see, that's even a perfect example too. So for Micah, Eli's older than you. You're in the middle. You don't have siblings to reflect on. And as I was thinking about this, where it says, what are some sources a person may turn to, especially when you're young? Would you, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but would Zyler be the guy that you go to for wisdom?
I don't think he would even go to me.
Well, and there's two parts of that. One, to think about going to your youngest brother, right, who is young, for wisdom. Probably not. Now, does Zyler have wisdom? Well, with experience, let's put it this way: if Zyler ever put his hand on a hot stove, right, and got burned, he would get wisdom from that right there, right? He would never do that again. Hopefully, he would never do that again. That's how you get wisdom, right? So he has.
It's like Zyler gets touched. He's like, ow.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do that again. That hurt, but I don't know why. Let's do it again. But so everyone has wisdom. You do gain wisdom by experience, but you probably wouldn't go to Zyler. Now, let's move you ahead 60 years. And you're going to be 78 years old. And I don't know how the difference, but Zyler will be 73, 72, whatever.
Wow.
Right? Okay. Okay, well, so anyway, he'll be in his 70s. Would you then be more comfortable seeking wisdom from Xyla? Hopefully,
not.
hopefully, well, I get it. Hopefully you will, right? Because he's now had a lifetime of experience, and he's your younger brother, but he has a different set of experiences, right? So you could seek wisdom from him. Now, put it on the shoe on the other foot. Just like you said, would Xyler seek wisdom from you? Maybe not. Would you seek wisdom from Eli? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what the wisdom that you're looking for, right? If you wanted to know what it takes to be a firefighter, he'd be a great person to ask, right? Because he's non-threatening. You can say, hey, I was thinking about this. And you don't want to go to the chief of the fire department and go, hey, I want to be a fireman. What do I do? And the guy's going to go away, kid. I mean, he wouldn't really do that, but it would be intimidating to go to him, right? But if you go to Eli and he goes, oh, man, it's hard, but man, is it fun. And here's the things that I remember. This was the hardest thing. This was the fun thing. So we look for wisdom a lot of times around people around us. For you, it's going to be friends. If you've got cousins, right? Parents, uh, grandparents, whatever. What? Well, and that's a great place to go. Uh, Sunday school teachers, church, hopefully family of God type of people. But those are kind of normal, the normal places that you go to. Peers, siblings, depending on what the nature of it is, certainly parents, family. Uh, but it says, what makes the quest for wisdom daunting and frustrating for some? Well, even if you're a smart person and you learn easily, you can get knowledge. Wisdom is a whole different thing. That's what makes it kind of challenging. Ultimately, and you kind of answered the question when I said, where can you go to get wisdom? Well, God will give you wisdom if you seek it. And of course, we've got this, that if you read the Bible, there's tons and tons of lessons learned and wisdom there. All right, let's move on because we're getting close to the end here. It's 10:18. Wow, this time is gone. Okay, so when Job talks about where shall wisdom be found and what is the place of understanding, it says he was not referring to having a skill, being shrewd, or having impressive intellect or common sense, right? This is not wisdom. That's knowledge. Even common sense, which is a good thing to have. A lot of times you get common sense based on wisdom. But it says he was referring to a kind of wisdom that is unattainable by humanity's own efforts. No one could estimate its value because it's impossible to find on this earth. This, especially the wisdom Job is talking about, can only come from God. You cannot buy it. You can't find it on the earth on your own. It does not derive from this earth. Okay. Now, in verse 20, it goes up to, which says, where does this wisdom come from? Where is understanding located? Job, where does he mention this? In verse 21, seeing it is hid from the eyes of all living and kept close from the fowls of the air. He specifically mentions fowls of the air. What's unique about raptors, birds of prey? And they circle, are they like right at the ground or are they up high? That's right. And so, you ever seen an eagle with glasses? Generally speaking, for birds of prey, owls, falcons, hawks, even birds that eat insects. You ever seen a bird, like a bird flying, little bird, and snatch an insect out of the air? How do they do that? Well, the first thing they do is they got to see it. They have to find it, right? So he says even the fowls of the air who've got sharp eyes, very good vision is the point. They can't find it. They don't. It's hidden from them. They don't see wisdom. We can't see it. All right. Um, so and then he also mentions destruction and death. Destruction or Abaddon is what it says in the CSB. Abaddon and death say, we have heard the fame thereof with our ears. So even it says Job poetically personified two realities that have accompanied humanity from the beginning in the Garden of Eden. Abaddon, which means destruction, and death have accompanied humanity ever since Adam and Eve sinned against God. And if you could ask destruction and death, where is wisdom? They're going to say, we've heard of it, but we don't know where it is because it's not in them. So where does it come from? Job in verses 23 to 27. Did I stop reading too soon? I have. Huh?
You were supposed to go through 20.
Yeah, okay. So let's finish that. So starting at 23, God understandeth the way thereof, and he knoweth the place thereof. So here's where wisdom comes from. Yeah, there we go. That's very revealing. God understandeth the way thereof, and he knoweth the place thereof. For he looketh to the ends of the earth, and seeth under the whole heaven, to make the weight for the winds, and he weigheth the waters by measure. Then when he made a decree for the rain, and a way for the lightning of the thunder, then did he see it, and declare it. He prepared it, yea, and searched it out. And to man he said, Behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. So there is where you get to what wisdom is. Where do you find it? What is wisdom? The fear of the Lord. And does it mean I'm afraid? Like, Job's friends were saying, God's punishing you for something you did. You should be afraid that if you make one wrong move, God's going to strike you. Something. He's going to punish you somehow. There is judgment, and I'll come to that in a second, because there will be a judgment. But God is a loving God. So in the study guide, Job emphatically stated that God alone understands the way to wisdom and knows where it is, because nothing is hidden from him. Those sharp-eyed hawks and eagles and whatnot, they can't see it. But God knows where it is because God made it. One might conclude that given the hiddenness of wisdom, as Job described it, God does not want us to find wisdom, or makes it difficult to discover. I don't know that that's true. You could assume that if it's very difficult to find. But it says this is untrue in the study guide. The fact that God has revealed his wisdom in his word indicates his desire for us to have it. Now, that's an advantage that Christians have, is that if we reference the Bible, if we read the Bible, if we come to Sunday school, if we come to church, if we listen to sermons, if we hang out with like-minded Christian people, it's going to be revealed to us. He wants to reveal himself. He wants to reveal his wisdom to us and for us to learn. So as I said before, the wisdom that God gives me, does God give me that wisdom so that I can make a good living? I don't know that that's the case, right? He's blessed me with a pretty good brain and, some skills. And as I get older, they're deteriorating for sure, all of it. But the wisdom that God gives me, what was the purpose of it? It was so that I could learn more about him and be able to experience him and be able to let my experience be hopefully a lesson to people around me to glorify him, and hopefully make people curious, wondering, say, wow, what has he got that I don't have? I listened to a guy on a podcast yesterday, and he said he's not a Christian. He said, matter of fact, he said he was an atheist. He was one of these really ugly atheist kind of people, just not too many years ago. He's not a Christian, but he was talking to somebody, and he said, I look at my life, and he was fired. He got canceled. He did a news story or something, and people watched it, or they saw a picture of him, and they go, "Who is this guy? He's hanging out with these people, and we don't want them because they're conservative or whatever it is." Even though he was, not a Christian, but they saw a picture of him and his girlfriend at the time, and they said, "Who is it?" And the internet has a way of finding out who you are and exposing you, and then approaching your employer. And he lost his job. He still had his girlfriend, but he lost his job because he was just in a picture with some people that other people didn't like. And they go, "Who is this guy? We're going to out him. We're going to hurt him. We're going to cancel him." And they didn't physically hurt him, but he lost his job. And he said, now I'm doing this podcast, and that's how he makes a living, and he enjoys it. He's good at it. He's talking to a guy. But he said, I look at my life, and my life on a scale of 1 to 10 is a 12 right now. And he said, I don't understand why. And he goes, and I know there's a reason for that. I mean, I'm watching this going, wow, for him to acknowledge there's something that's causing this. And he said, I've heard that every person has a God-shaped hole in them. And so, and what got me looking at this was I had seen a tweet from him that said, okay, I'm coming out. I'm Bible curious. And I start reading this little tweet thing that he had written, and a lot of people were saying, I watched this podcast, and I was praying for you while I watched that podcast. So I watched the podcast to see what had happened. And it's at this point, he goes, and he asked this guy, he says, so people say there's a God-shaped hole. And so now I'm kind of curious. And he asked this guy, he says, so what is it about you? Because I know you're you're a Christian, tell me, what does that do in your life? And the guy said, well, I'm a Catholic, and I'm basically a Christian Catholic. And he said, I go to church and it refreshes me. It's not like a chore. It's not an obligation. I go there and it revives me. And he says, we go there and Catholics are very structured in how they do the worship and whatnot. But he said, that's not how it is in our it's not just that. He says, at the end, every time we go out, the priest says, go out and spread the good news. They're given the Great Commission every time they leave, wherever this guy goes to church. And anyway, he was able to witness to this guy about what is it, because he said, my life is so good. He said, I'm going to get married. I've been dating this girl for a long time. And he said, now, he goes, we're going to get married. And he said, it's baby steps. And he goes, and no, marriage is not a small step. But he goes, me and my fiance want God in our life to, I'm trying to think of the word he used. I don't remember if it was bless, but he knew there's something greater than him. That's wisdom. Or a search for it. And I prayed for him when I was watching this. This was a day or two old, but that here's someone searching that God would work in his life, that God would use me because he used this other guy to open a door, right? So it says, God doesn't make wisdom hard to find. He's going to reveal it to those who search for it. The fact that God has revealed his wisdom in his word indicates his desire for us to have it. Okay? The wisdom of God is granted to those who seek Christ, whom he has redeemed. This is God's wisdom that he wants to impart on us. And I put a question here that says, can an unbeliever have true wisdom? And I would answer that and say no. An unbeliever can have wisdom. They can have life experiences. They can seek things out. They can have wisdom. But ultimately, if you're an unbeliever, what have you not done? You've not given yourself to Christ, right? So no matter how smart you are, and you can be very, very smart. There are really smart people in this world who aren't Christians, haven't given themselves to Christ, but they're not wise, because the second they take their last breath, or if the rapture happens, well, I won't say if the rapture happens, because if the rapture happens, they'll still be alive unless, I'm flying the plane they're on and I go away and there's nobody there to land the plane. But generally speaking, but for sure, when they take their last breath on earth, no matter how wise or smart they thought they were on this earth, whether they're Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey, rich, billionaires, smart men, and there are smart women too, billionaires. The second they take their last breath, if they're not a Christian, they will find out how wise they were or they weren't, because they're at that moment they become eternally separated, right? And that's in that podcast I was talking about, the guy who was telling the man who was searching. He said there are a lot of people, there are a lot of churches that are loosening their standards right now. That's to paraphrase what he said. He said they want to talk about God's love and say, God would accept all this. God wants us to embrace all this diversity and all these things. God wants us to love it. And he said what they're not teaching is that there is a judgment. God will judge. Now, not like happened to Job. God allowed Satan to do that, right? But there will come a judgment, and it's going to be, if you're not a Christian, God will say, Jesus will say, "Depart from me, I never knew you," and you're eternally separated. So that was his point, was that there has to be that message that there will come a judgment. We want to be inclusive to the extent that we want to provide an example. We want to welcome people into God's family, no matter what their circumstance is. But ultimately, we have to warn them that if you choose not to accept this, at some point there will be a judgment. All right. Now, let me finish up. Wisdom is the fear of the Lord. That's the last verse. Now it says, to fear the Lord means having such awe of him, not afraid. Oh, I'm afraid if I do the wrong thing, God's going to strike me dead. Wisdom, to fear the Lord, means having such awe of him that it affects how you live. It precipitates a desire to know him and leads to a reverence for him. It involves a trusting submission to God. Doesn't mean you're a weak person, but you submit to God and seek his way in everything, your whole life. It involves a trusting submission to God that seeks to know his word and obey it, accepting God's will and worshiping him alone. Okay? So there's where wisdom comes from. Questions on that? All right. Woo, I got kind of bogged down at the beginning. It picked up steam at the end. So as we go out, think about that. And in all that you do, remember, you're God's. Try to be the example for Him. If you have the opportunity to witness, take it. And it's hard sometimes because you're maybe a little bit awkward or embarrassed, or depending on who you're with, you may not want to look weird or different. But that's a good weird. That's a good different. All right, let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you again for this day. Thank you for each one that's here this morning. And I just pray that you'll go with us this week. God, give us your strength, your comfort, and give us a desire, Lord, to want to seek you, to submit to you, to learn about you, God, that to give ourselves to you, to be that example for you that others would see. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, you weren't here when we sang Happy Birthday to Micah, so you got to sing by yourself.
Closer to taxes.
That is a good perspective. Remember the video I showed you